Welcome to They Live by Film, a platform dedicated to bringing you film discussion and interviews from around the world. I am Adam Lundy, and I am joined as always by my stunning co-hosts, Chris Haskell and Zach Bryant.
Ooh la la.
Hello,
Hello,
hello.
hello. How are we?
Hey, Mr. Adam. Doing so much better now. That's the proper way to get introduced. How are you?
I'm excellent. I cannot complain. I cannot complain at all. Life is great.
That's great. I don't really have any particular thing for this episode to be brought by other than I am so happy that there's only a month left of the first quarter because like 50% of my year of like work wise is bunched into the first quarter because that's where I have to try to make all the sales. Um, so I'm like dying. But it's only a month ago.
You sales guys, which are doing work for 3 months of the year and then chilling out for the rest. Brutal.
Yeah, yeah. What's going on in y'all's world? Y'all been watching anything?
I watched a couple of things since we last recorded. When we last recorded, I talked about Hell House LLC for the sort of prequel sequel. And I'd mentioned I hadn't seen two or three. So literally that night after we finished recording, I watched two and three of the Hell House LLC franchise. Definitely a step down in quality. I think two is pretty. There's actually some pretty good acting in two. There's one particular actor who's actually pretty good. Um, three is yeah, three is not great, but again, like the real thing with these films is like they did such a great job creating lore and creating really cool backstories and sort of linking them, from one film to the other. They're really well thought out, well planned films. Even if sometimes the sort of low budget aspect kind of lets it down in some way, especially with the acting. Some of the acting in number three is very, very poor. Um, so three, a little bit of a letdown. I thought two was pretty good, but still not as good as one or four. Um, I rewatched Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part One because Mission Impossible movies are awesome, and I have nothing more to say on that front. Um, and then I watched two films that I've been wanting to see for a little while. They came out relatively recently, and I've been wanting to see them, and I had some free time during the week, so I made that time. So the first is The Zone of Interest,
Yeah.
the new film from Jonathan Glazer. Geez, what a film! It's just insane. Um, like I don't know if you guys are too familiar with what it's about or anything like that. But it is essentially following the daily lives of the family of the head of Auschwitz concentration camp.
I have I have been to that location where he was because he's over Auschwitz one, if I'm remembering correctly. Um, so a lot of that stuff is like still there at Auschwitz one, and including, I guess, spoilers. Even though I haven't seen this movie, they still have the gallows where he's hung, like on the grounds. That's still
Oh,
like there. So,
Oh, they don't even get into that. This is just showing his daily life. They
oh,
don't
okay.
even
So they
get
don't go into like post World War II.
No, not at
Okay.
all. Not at all. They don't even show inside the camp. And this is what's crazy. The sound design in this movie is insane. Because they never go inside the camp, but you hear what's going on inside the
Yeah, because
camp.
it's only feet away. Like you look at like where he was living at and like his kids and stuff. Like they didn't go into super depth of his family, so I'm really interested to watch the movie. But yeah, you're like, oh, he was like right on the grounds. Like
Oh
it's
yeah, like the back wall is their back wall of their yard is like the wall to the camp. It's crazy.
yeah, the
Um,
because the part where they're at, I don't know if they do this the same in the movie, but it's where the crematorium is and where
mhm.
like the experiments for the death camp work. Because obviously the main death camp isn't there; that's moved to Auschwitz too. But they did do a lot of experiments there too for how to do it.
Yeah, and again, I don't know because they literally never go inside the camp itself. Everything
Interesting.
is all kept around the house, but you just hear the most horrific things ever done by human beings, while watching a scene of a family playing in their garden. It's just such an insane juxtaposition of image and sound. It's just it's a horrific movie, but it's incredibly good. So I certainly recommend that. And the other film I watched, which is also sad, but in very, very different ways, I watched Past Lives. I don't know if you guys had heard about that one, the film
Yeah.
from
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Celine Song. That was very, very good. If you're a fan of like the Before trilogy, those kind of movies, uh, Eric Romer, that kind of stuff. If you're a fan of that stuff, I'd recommend Past Lives. Really, really good film. Uh, Nice sort of emotional sort of plot beats, but it's also really good looking as well. Cast is really good, especially the lead Greta Lee. She's really really good. So uh, recommend both of those movies. I watched them like 2 days in a row, and I was like, Jesus, my head is wrecked after watching these two movies because Past Lives is sad, but obviously not in the same way as The Zone of Interest. Um, but yeah, and then obviously just watch some Kubrick movies. But that's all from me anyway.
It's so crazy to me that Glazer did something like Sexy Beast, which is an awesome movie, like, but just like this kind of cool crime movie, right? And then was able to pull off something like Zone of Interest. Like, those are just fundamentally different movies. It should be from different filmmakers.
Well, like he like I don't know if have you seen Under the Skin?
Oh, that's okay. So this is more along like that lens, or like
Yeah, like because
I,
obviously Under the Skin is very sort of like in terms of like how it's filmed and how the like everything is very very subtle. I haven't seen Sexy Beast, but I've heard like it has a great dialogue and it's very punchy and
oh
stuff
yeah,
like that. So I've heard that about Sexy Beast. I've been meaning to get around to it for a long time. But Under the Skin, if you've seen that one, it's obviously very very different to that as well. Everything's very muted, kind of all more atmosphere driven, and Zone of Interest kind of falls more into that category. Now, that's not to say that there isn't tons of dialogue in Zone of Interest. There is, but it does lean heavily on creating soundscapes and atmospheres kind of in the same way that Under the Skin did.
okay, okay. That's, yeah, just when I saw the plot, I assumed it was a Haneke movie, and then I
Yeah,
was
not
like,
surprised.
Jonathan Glazer, huh? Interesting. But what about you, Zach?
Um, well, I guess I got a few things. So I guess the first thing, I went to theaters last week to see Land of Bad, which is it has one of the lesser Hemsworths in it, and it's got Russell Crowe in it. And honestly, the trailers didn't necessarily sell me on the movie. It looked like a really, really generic war film, and I was just gonna pass it up because I didn't really want to go all the way out there for no reason. And then I got two people who messaged me that I knew who said you should probably watch Land of Bad. It seems like your type of thing, and that probably is not a selling point for a lot of people, but it was a selling point for me. Uh, so I went down there and yeah, it's pretty good. I think I've just figured out that a lot of studios don't exactly know how to sell war films without making them look generic.
Hmm.
They're just like, let's say like trailer lines and let's have, people shooting, and it's like that's not necessarily interesting. Like Land of Bad is pretty cool because it's they're doing an extraction mission, and a new Air Force guy's there who's played by Hemsworth, and he's got to talk to the guy who runs the drone in this movie, which is Russell Crowe and his team, about basically how to get him out of an area. And he has to use like the limited stuff he's got. Like he has to carefully use the resources that are on that drone to like carefully so he can figure out how to escape this like really bad area.
Okay.
Really interesting. And then there's a whole scene where terrible stuff is happening. And I'm not going to spoil too much, but I think it really captures like how the film sets itself up. But like, there's a part where he's going through all this stuff. They've made Russell Crowe like leave because he's been on the clock way too long, and you can tell he's like eating him up while he's looking for vegan cheese for his wife. So it's just like cutting back and forth between him trying to look for this vegan cheese at the grocery store and this dude going through some of the worst torture imaginable.
Okay.
And it's really good. Like I was very impressed because they did not. I don't think the trailer sold it very well. So yeah, I hopefully people go see that one because it's like made for like $18 million and the effects are great. I don't know how they did it for that cheap, but it looks really good. Um, then last night I rewatched the first two of Nolan's Batman trilogy, and that's been like the first time in like 10 years since I've seen either one of them. And yeah, Batman Begins is still the best one. I'm still standing by that. I was wondering if my
Dang.
opinions would change, but no.
You're a
Batman
brave
Begins
man.
Batman Begins is better. Like, especially watching them back to back. Like, Dark Knight is like a great vehicle for Ledger to do cool Joker stuff, but Batman Begins is way better plotted.
I think
Like,
Batman Begins is a better comic book movie.
yeah, I mean, it looks better too. Like, I was so impressed because I do think like Dark Knight could be a little flat looking, especially during the day. And I'm like, this movie just looks cool, like all the way through. And then I looked at was apparently nominated for cinematography, and I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that works. Um, yeah, I guess I'll get to Rises maybe today. I'm not as looking forward to that one, but maybe it'll grow on me versus the last time I saw it in theaters. I think was the last time I watched it was when it actually released. So it's been a while. Um, and then the only other thing I'll bring up is I watched a trilogy of TV movies on Tubi, which are called Red Riding. Um, they're a very, very bleak crime series where it takes place during 3 different years in this town about these murders and kidnappings that are happening, and it
Mhm.
all like deals with like police corruption and stuff. So you have some characters who come in every movie, and you kind of learn a little bit more through each one of what's like. The first one has Andrew Garfield before he did Social Network, and it's a very how do I want to put it? It feels kind of lynchy to me. Like it's not that surreal, but just like it's very loose in a lot of ways. It's a lot of it does have like this light surrealism to it. It's like if Fincher tried to make a Lynch movie, I guess is the way I described the first one. And each one, it kind of clears up more and more what's going on. The first one's much more of a vibey type movie, and then they kind of go deeper into like the plot and like the police corruption and stuff that's going on. So they're free on TV. I highly recommend that people watch them because I don't think a lot of people have, based on like the letterbox numbers, but they're pretty good. Yeah,
What are they called?
they're called Red Riding.
Oh,
It's Red Riding, In Our Lord, 1974, 1980, and 1983. They're based on a book series that was actually 4 of them. So they left out 1977, but in 1980 they kind of go over what happens very quickly. So I haven't read the books. I ordered them, but yeah, it flows really well. It's got a great cast. Sean Bean's in 2 of them.
okay. They're
Yeah,
British, are they?
yeah.
Okay.
Very like one thing that I was noticed. I had to ask Crit about this because I was like, "Is Yorkshire just usually hard to understand?" He's like, "Yeah, for people
Yeah.
not accustomed, it's pretty tough." And because like the first, I was like, "Thank God I have subtitles. This is like
Yeah.
watching Peaky Blinders."
Yorkshire. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, "What is?" I was like, "I don't even know what they're saying." Like I'm listening to Sean Bean. I was like, "I know I can understand Sean Bean, but I can't even understand him here." But apparently he's
Yeah.
from there, so that might just
It
be
would
more of
be.
his natural accent.
It's pretty much all like the northern in Game of Thrones, all the northern houses
Yeah.
essentially talk with Yorkshire accents. So if you're familiar with Game of Thrones, all like the northern houses would talk in a kind of a Yorkshire accent. Because Game of Thrones is kind of based on uh British
hmm
the northern counties and the southern counties and stuff. It's all very geographically relevant to actual Britain. Yeah, the cast is really good in these. Like, there's like I'm just looking through the cast this year. David Morrissey was in it, Rebecca Hall,
Uh,
Andrew Garfield,
Patty, the guy who plays one of the Andrews in Hot Fuzz, he's really good at it. He's in the second one. Um, I
Robert
can't
Sheehan.
Patty Custine or something like that. But yeah, it they I'm surprised it did because there's a huge cast
Sean
to it. I'm sure it was
Harris.
popular and
I've never
uh
even heard of it. Like I thought, like I would have heard of it. Like usually stuff that's popular in the UK will be similarly popular here because a lot of we share a lot of channels. Like this aired on Channel 4
mhm.
in the UK, which obviously we would have here in Ireland as well. So I'm gonna see if I can. This might even just be streaming on the channel. Channel 4 have like a streaming service. It's free. I might check and see if it's streaming there. Because we don't have Tubi here.
Remind
Yeah.
me, Adam, if you get Channel 4, there's a couple comedies that are not streaming and Netflix anymore that are like British shows that I want to see if they're streaming on like any of those local channels. So remind me after we get off, I want to ask you about some.
Okay. Yeah, sounds
Because
fun.
Netflix used to have a lot of British shows, and then they introduced something over here called BritBox.
Box. Yeah.
Yeah, which is okay, but they don't have these particular comedies that we're looking for. So
Well, like I have the this I have the four Channel 4 streaming service open right now as I'm looking for Red Riding. So I'm happy to have a quick search while we're here. I'm sure our listeners will be interested as to what comedy series you're looking at.
okay, so it's a little bit of an obscure one. It's based in an airport, a small regional airport, and it's an office style comedy based in that airport. And
Okay. Well,
it's
what's it called?
I know. Um, you know what? Forget it, because it's been a while since I looked. We looked for it for about a year and a half, and then gave up, and it's been about 2 years since we looked.
Okay.
If I find it here quickly, I'll say something. Otherwise, yeah, if you don't know what I'm talking about, that makes me feel even more that it was kind of obscure. Um,
It looks like it's called Borderline. Would that be right?
Borderline.
Okay. Let me have a quick look. Borderline. Nope, not available on the Channel 4 player. Looks as though it's because it didn't stream on Channel 4. It originally was done by Channel 5. So that would explain why it's not on the Channel 4 player. Because
Oh,
it was originally shown on Channel 5 in the UK, which is a different network altogether.
okay. Well, that would explain it. And the other one I'm trying to find, it's just like a series of letters and numbers. It's one of the best comedies I've ever seen. It's always a hard name to remember. It's just the name of like the part of the BBC that covers politics. And it's the whole
If
comedy
it's
is.
Yeah, if it's based on if it's BBC, then it won't be on this either. BBC have their own streaming service, I think, as
Oh,
well.
okay, okay,
So
never mind then.
not to worry, not to worry.
Well, glad we
Cool.
solved that.
Quick mysteries solved.
um, yeah, just Zach, you'll be proud of me. I saw a movie that was made before 2000. I mean, after 2000.
Oh, I was like, is that unusual that you haven't seen anything since like?
After 2000.
Okay.
Um, I saw Saltburn. So I have
Yes.
somebody I trust their opinion very much has been pushing me to see it for a while, and so I finally wore down. Uh, it wore me down. It so two things. There are individual scenes in that movie that I understand why people say are shocking.
Yeah. 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 I know which ones you're talking about. My girlfriend gags every time I talk about the bathtub in Saltburn.
So like I get it. I get why people are saying this is like such a shocking movie in the sense that there's like scenes in there, but overall it's not that bad, right? Like the I think the ideas in the movie are pretty interesting and kind of insidious and lead to some really good discussion.
Yeah, I mean, the way I sold it to my girlfriend, because after I watched it, I wanted her to see it, and
Yeah.
it's because one of her favorite movies is Talented Mr. Ripley, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
it's Talented Mr. Ripley, go watch it. So
Yeah, actually, the person who recommended it, that's what I asked. That's what I asked her. I said, "Is it, is he gonna?" While I was watching it, I was kind of texting, and I was like, is he gonna talented Mr. Ripley this family?" um, but it gives off that vibe. But the other thing that I don't know if maybe people don't talk about it or what, but when the main character needs to get like confident and sexy, he turns it on in a way that I was not expecting. Like the sex in that movie is hot. Like uh and like more than I was expecting it to be. The way it's filmed, like it's very sensual and like hot. Um I would love to see this director, it's a woman. I would love to see this director remake Blue is the Warmest Color. So maybe it wouldn't be creepy when she did it.
have you seen Promising Young Woman yet?
No.
Okay, you should watch that because it's same director.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's good.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, really good movie though. I don't know, is it a 2024 movie or 23?
It was on my 23 list, so yeah,
23. Yeah.
yeah, it came
Okay.
out
Man,
like last quarter.
Damn, I was gonna be so happy to see
Have one for the
24.
list.
I know. I'm gonna see Dune this weekend. I'm gonna try to see it on Sunday, so I'll have something
I'm seeing
to
it in like 5 hours. So,
hell yeah.
yeah,
Are you gonna see it twice in the same day?
no, you'll be lucky if I see it once. So, it's a 3 hour sci-fi movie that has Timothy Chalamet in it. This is like, it's just a checklist of things I would usually not see.
Well, it's funny because I actually have a completely indifferent to Chalamet as well. Like I don't understand the appeal, but they did a good job of casting. I think he plays the part well. And Zendaya is another one. I don't understand her fame at all. Like I'm completely neutral, and I don't get it. I don't get why she's famous. She still looks like a kid. Um, but she's awesome in this, I think, and so I can't wait to see how she plays the. Um,
She's
her-
awesome for the whole 2 minutes she was on screen.
I was about to say, I knew somebody who like took a kid there, and he's a teenager, he has like an obsession with Zendaya, and he was just so excited to see her, and I'm like, man, he was disappointed then
Yeah,
because she is not in that movie.
yeah.
I'm sure she
she,
will be in a lot of two. I
yeah,
assume.
she plays a much bigger role for sure. Um, but
Speaking of epic movies, I
yeah,
suppose we'll talk about some.
Epic sci-fi. Here we go. Is that the first one? No.
It is. It is the
Is it?
first one.
Cool. Cool. Okay, it works out perfect.
It is a perfect segue. So yeah, we're obviously continuing our Kubrick run. This is part 3. And we're really hitting some big boys today. With some of the stuff we're going to talk about. So in 1968, Stanley Kubrick made a little old film called 2001: A Space Odyssey. Letterboxd reads as follows: Humanity finds a mysterious object buried beneath the lunar surface and sets off to find its origins with the help of HAL 9000, the world's most advanced supercomputer. That is a terrible description of this movie. It describes like roughly half an hour in the middle of this movie. Doesn't really cover a whole lot. Yeah, 2001: A Space Odyssey. I don't think anybody's going to be a bad guy here, right? Surely nobody's going to be the bad guy here.
I mean, I kind of feel like the bad guy, even though I really like the movie, but we'll see. Well, that'll probably be a whole thing.
Okay.
just to set the stage before we talk about that, we are all aligned that up until now each movie's gotten better, right?
Like,
Uh,
mm,
hmm.
I mean,
It's a
well,
loaded
I
question.
think in the groups of three, but like the killing's pretty high for me, so that's tough for me.
So not necessarily.
It's a loaded question because I think 2001 is his best movie, but whether it's my favorite is another thing.
No, no, no. Up until 2001. Oh, no, I guess we can't say that because Spartacus falls down low. So never mind. So, because it would be like Fear and Desire, Killer's Kiss, and Spartacus for me. And then he gets
Yeah,
into his real movies.
I get what you mean. Yeah, so every film is better than the previous one, is what you're saying. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, no, I don't think that's the case. No, definitely not. Spartacus definitely is a step down.
Okay, fair enough. Never mind then.
But anyway, what do the critics think of this little film first?
What's y'all's guess for this one?
It's got to be
Top
top
five.
10. Yeah, I
Top
was gonna say
five,
top
I'd say.
five, but it's either right at five or right outside five.
All I know is that in the most important critics poll, which is They Live by Film, Greatest Films Critics poll, it was number 1. So
Which
that's the
no
only
one
one.
can ever reference. So,
I still have the letterbox list. The
oh,
letterbox
that's right.
list still exists
Yeah,
on my
okay.
letterbox.
It has been consistently number 3 since almost the beginning of the list.
Yeah, that's not
Really.
surprising.
It was 4, and then in 2013 it moved up to 3, and it has not let go of that position. People love this movie.
I'm not surprised.
And I think that's why I'm like I really like this movie, but it's maybe not in my top five Kubricks. Like, it's not the one I would rewatch. Like, it's good and I really like it, but then I feel like the bad guy because I'm like, oh yeah, this is like rank 3 now that I know that. That's great. And I'm like, yeah, it's good.
Well, I suppose this is a conversation that we have to have about 2001: A Space Odyssey, because if I was to rank my top, 5 most rewatchable Kubrick movies, it probably wouldn't be there. But for ranking, like if I was ranking it based on just objective cinematic quality, then it's undisputed number one, in my opinion, at least anyway. So I suppose we're talking about two different things: rewatchability, entertainment versus the craft of filmmaking, I suppose.
I wouldn't go as aggressive as this description, but I think I remember somebody putting like 2001 is the most beautiful, boring movie I would never rewatch. And I would not go that aggressive. I do not think the
No,
movie's
I
boring. I don't think it's boring at
definitely
all.
not.
But
No,
it's
definitely
like
not.
I kind of get the sentiment. Like if somebody said, "Yeah, I watched it. I'm glad I watched it. I would never rewatch it again." I'd be like, "I get that. Like I can understand that."
I
There
don't
was
even
an
understand that, to be honest. I've rewatched 2001 so many times. I don't even know how many times I've seen 2001. I find it very rewatchable
I've
because
seen
it's
it
one of those.
twice.
I think it's one of those movies that you kind of have to rewatch to really try and get it. It's kind of like Mulholland Drive, and that way, the more you watch it, the more the plot makes sense. Like I was reading through some letterbox reviews and saw some absolutely unhinged takes on this movie
Please say you kept some. I would love to
from
hear them.
people. I'd have to go digging, but there was one guy who complained that everything in the film is so unrelated and it feels like vignettes. I'm
Okay,
like,
then he just didn't pay attention.
you
Like
just don't
I would.
understand the point of this film, then, right? You know, he's missed the entire point of the film. No, these are not unrelated, vignettes or whatever you want to call them. But yeah, I read some unhinged stuff about this
I
movie,
do
but
find
I,
it
I find it very
fascinating
rewatchable.
that I was looking. I just saw it when I went at the Letterboxd. It's um it's only ranked 126 on Letterboxd's top 250, which is very surprising to me
Yeah, there's so much recency bias in Letterboxd Top 250
because
that
I'm
it's
pretty sure Dune Part 2 is now higher.
yeah, but you can never take that stuff seriously when stuff first comes out. And then the actual like a lot of people on Letterboxd are film bros, let's face it. So that list is always going to skew towards newer, popular films. I never really take much credence on the Letterboxd Top 250.
Yeah, honestly, I was just surprised because I was like, oh yeah, that's like top on. I know it's on like I think in Sight and Sound. What is it at? I'm sure it's up very high.
I think it's number 3 or 4 in the most recent Sight and Sound
Yeah,
poll. 3 or 4, something like that. It's very, very high.
and I will
Um,
always say it's better than the hooker who cleans her house. I haven't
and
seen
I
it.
would agree with you. As someone who's seen both movies, as someone who has seen both movies, and I would agree with you. This is definitely better than John Dielman. I would 100% agree with that as someone who has actually seen both, so I can give an actual opinion rather than complaining that a woman is number one
Hey, I
for
didn't
that
complain it
sake.
was a woman. A hooker could be any gender. I am not discriminating against that. It could have been a man cleaning his house as a hooker, and I would have had the same criticism that I don't want to
That's
watch
fair. That's fair.
it.
That's fair. I suppose if we get into actual opinions, on 2001. So as I said, I've seen 2001 a bunch of times. I don't. I would say this time when I watched it, it's at least the 10th time that I've
Okay.
seen it. I watched it a lot, and I got kind of burst into film when I was like 17, 18. I watched this film a lot. I had a DVD, and I just would start it again. I was just obsessed with this movie. Um, when I sort of think about film and sort of thinking about the pantheon of film and the best films ever made and what have you, and that kind of conversation. Um, it goes back to what I said earlier versus entertainment versus filmmaking and such. It's not the most entertaining film ever made in terms of like, action-packed plot developments, et cetera, et cetera. I still think Vertigo is the best film ever made in that sense. But when I think of film as an art form and a craft, I think 2001: A Space Odyssey it almost transcends the medium of filmmaking. That's how good I think this is from a filmmaking standpoint in terms of the technical aspects of filmmaking, in terms of plotting versus metaphor, in terms of the different layers and threads of the film, in terms of its scope and its ambition. I think it transcends the medium. I think that this is as close to a perfect example of film as art that you could
I,
ever get.
and I do, it's obviously been influential. It reminds me of something that just recently was talked about. The guy who directed Dune, uh, Denny. Does anyone want to say his
Vil,
last name so I don't mess it up?
Villeneuve or
Yeah,
something.
yeah. So he recently had kind of. I saw a little bit of backlash for it because he was discussing how he really really hates dialogue. He thinks it's like basically movies have become too televised, like they focus way too much on dialogue and things like that rather than telling a story visually as possible. And I feel like a lot of that comes from like you watch something like 2001. I can name like two pieces of dialogue from 2001, and that's not a criticism. It's just the visuals are much more striking in that film. um it's one of those movies where I would say its best medium is film, which is I know it's developed with the book. I'm actually curious of how the book is because I can't imagine it. I feel like it'd be a really boring book.
I've been wanting to read the book for so long. It just doesn't seem to really be in print. Every time I've gotten that curiosity and gone to look to find it, it seems like hard to actually find. I don't know how. I actually don't know how popular the book is. It never really seems to be in a. It never seems to be new editions getting printed of it.
No, I see it in secondhand shops a lot. That's usually where I find it. It's just like old copies that were from
Hmm.
like the 80s and stuff. Probably, I think when the sequel, because this is like one of the few Kubrick movies that has a sequel, right? I think there's
Yeah,
The Shining, there's
2010,
this.
the year we made contact.
Yeah, so I think The Shining and this might be the only two that have sequels.
I think so,
Yeah,
as far as I can
that's fascinating actually.
tell.
To now to think about it,
A Clockwork Blue,
one day give somebody some
uh,
time.
Bro,
Brolita.
Jesus.
No, but here's a question. I mean, just quickly on 2001. So um, the basic plot, if you're gonna boil it down, right, is not getting into the meaning and the metaphor and all that. We can talk about that, but like the basic like plot structure is there is um, uh, 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 a particular alien race that is reaching out right through these like rectangular sort of spheres, right? And they are at Earth at different points in history, and we meet like one point, like the prehistoric people find them, the monkeys, right? Like the animals find them, and then we immediately go into like space where they have found some weird kind of disturbance on, is it Mars or whatever, some other planet, and they're going to like check it out, right? And then that leads the guy in this like crazy journey, right?
Yeah.
That's the basic kind of like plot structure of this, right?
Yeah, it's essentially about a race of aliens who have kind of transcended, what we would call, the physical, plane of existence. And they are essentially have been nudging humanity along in the chain of evolution. So, after the apes find the monolith, they now figure out how to use weapons and tools. And that kind of leads on then to uh, the
The
greatest
greatest
match
transition shot in history is that.
greatest match cut in the history of film. Fuck yeah! When he throws the bone up in the air and turns into the spaceship, and that's Kubrick basically saying that we haven't really changed a lot
Yeah.
from the war mongering apes that we were thousands of years ago. Nothing really has changed all that much. We still hate and kill each other over land and resources all the time. Um, and then the alien race are essentially saying, okay, it's time for you to take the next step. The way they nudge them is putting this monolith that was on the moon, that was buried, which is sending a signal towards Jupiter. And then, which is what the team of scientists are heading towards to find out. They go to Jupiter, another monolith opens, and then Care goes through his trip and transition into being this kind of next level metaphysical being, and that's the end of the movie.
So there's a couple of themes in there that I think are interesting. If you look at going back to Fear and Desire, and then Paths of Glory, Spartacus, although it's a different type of warfare, it's still Spartacus is war. Doctor Strangelove is war. 2001 is essentially how like humans can't stop fighting each other and fighting for power and claiming power, right? Um, it's or at least it's a theme in the movie. Um, I'm interested in like, and it comes up again. Like Clockwork Orange is not a large scale war, but it's certainly culture war, and it's certainly like a war within somebody, right? There's a lot of war in Barry Lyndon. It just Full Metal Jacket, obviously. Like this theme for him seems to be like where he's comfortable with metaphor, right? Or maybe he just finds books that like pull that out. But that's one thing that I thought was interesting so far. If we're looking through where are we at, this would be his 10th? No, no, not 10th yet. Eighth movie, four, and then three, seven, eighth movie, right? Um, and then the other one I wanted to ask y'all about was there seems to be in all of his movies so far an ending that kind of implies like inevitability or a little bit of a nihilistic ending or a little bit of like nothing we do matters or like it's the world's going to continue on as it is anyways, none of it matters, right? And I just think it's more subtle in this one, but I think it's also here because it's like nothing we do matters because we're kind of being controlled by this race that we can't even like they're they're just like guiding us like puppets, so our actions don't matter, right? And I just thought it was interesting that like first of all he's using this like war so consistently, I think as a basis for like a metaphor for what he's trying to say, and then also that he seems to really love this sort of like nihilistic type ending, um, and it's just coming up again and again and again and again. And I noticed it this time as I rewatched 2001. I don't know if you'll have any, if y'all thought about that at all, or if you agree, or I don't know how it sounds when I
Yeah,
say it.
like the way that you're talking about the ending is a little bit different to how I always interpret it. I get where you're coming from. Yeah, like we're essentially been nudged the whole time by this sort of otherworldly, race of beings that are sort of above our level of understanding of the universe. And they've been nudging us along the way. That's what I see it more as rather than control. It's more of a nudging to say, okay, it's time to take the next step here. Here's
Mm-hmm.
a nudge in this direction. Um, like they don't have to follow the signal to Jupiter. They did it because humans are we are intrinsically curious. We went to the moon because we were curious to see what was up there. On the moon,
Right.
we found the monolith. The monolith sent us to Jupiter, but we didn't have to go there. Humanity didn't have to make the journey, didn't have to make that odyssey to Jupiter. We went there because we were curious. So I feel it more of a nudging than as a control. And the ending to me, I think it seems to be more hopeful than nihilistic because it proves that humanity can take the next stage in evolution. Humanity can improve to what it came from. We look at the star child at the end, kind of looking over the earth, and it's to me, it's like it's a birth of a new way of humanity um, existing. So, we started off as these uncultured apes fighting over watering holes and stuff like that. And now, by the time the film ends, 2.5 hours later, the human race has now been almost reborn in a way where we have infinitely more knowledge and just an entirely different view of how the universe works. Um, that's how I read it. But again, I can see where you're coming from. I choose to maybe be more hopeful in its ending that humanity can evolve like once again and move on from the last couple of thousand years that the film is depicted where we've just been warmongering apes.
And I kind of wonder if the film is almost like a litmus test of like kind of somebody's own worldview in a sense, because I do kind of agree with you a little bit more, Adam. Because when you talk about like curiosity in itself is not like a bad thing. I think that's a very positive element of why there is to be something hopeful. Like the idea of being curious is to say you're kind of pushing towards change, even if you're resistant towards it, in that sense that you want to see something new, you want to see something or experience something different. And I think that kind of shows as a very positive trait among like some of the more negative traits that get highlighted, especially at the very beginning of the film and throughout the film and with Hal and everything else.
So here's I'm going to make an argument for nihilism, or for him saying that it's inevitable or something like that, right? Because I think it shows up in a couple of ways. So one is in the beginning where it's destined that animals are going to fight, right? And the animal with the biggest tool wins, right? So this monolith sort of maybe nudges them along and whatever, gives an idea to pick up a bone and use it as a weapon, and then they win, right? And start to evolve. Then immediately you get into a 10-minute roughly sequence that's consumed by capitalism, right? You have like Best Westerns in space and like, Marriott's in space. And he's using like a telephone to call his daughter, and it's like a branded, company, like a branded telephone, right? And like it's not until they get into like the deep depths of space that they're able to just be pure like scientists, and then they get caught by their own invention, which is AI, that's too confident and starts to make mistakes, right? And turn on them. So there's, and then they get caught into a beam that pulls them into this like future where there's a more intelligent being who's sort of introduces him to a higher form of intelligence, and then the movie starts over and reborn. So anyways, the I I'm just picking up. I mean, there's a lot that happens that I'm not saying, but that's why I kind of view it as Kubrick. At least I don't know if it's the whole point of the movie, but at least sort of picking on this theme of inevitability that seems to be in a lot of his work. And he
There's
shares.
one.
Mhm.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, and something he shares with Kieślowski, I think, because Kieślowski's most of his stuff is about inevitability before he did the Decalogue.
There's one connection that's really a fan theory. I don't think it's ever actually been confirmed. But there's one kind of fan theory that does connect to two of your threads regarding the corporation aspect. Then, in the next section where they get to be pure scientists away from corporate side of things. But funnily enough, do you guys know the theory as to why they called Hal Hal?
No.
Okay, so you have Hal, HAL. If you move all those letters up one, what do you get?
IBK.
No. Also, IBM.
I mean, IBM. Okay.
IBM, the computer manufacturing conglomerate.
I did my alphabet wrong. IBM. Yes, right. Okay. So
Yes,
what?
that's Kubrick having a dig at the IBM company, or the computer manufacturing industry by naming the AI computer system that eventually goes crazy and tries to destroy humanity. Um, is named sort of, well, the theory is that he couldn't obviously name it IBM for obvious reasons, because they would never sign off on this. So he just changed the letters down one, to kind of say this is what computer companies are eventually going to do to us, which is ironic
Interesting.
now in the year 2024 where AI has become so prominent. Obviously, Chris, you will be
Yeah,
able
it's
to
like let's
talk a
talk
lot
about this,
more on.
Chris, about Hal over here.
Yeah, so Chris will have a much better insight due to his actual job. But yeah,
Yeah, it's scary. Some of the ways it's coming in. It's not the only difference I would say between science fiction and reality is that in science fiction it tends to be like almost like a mistaken coding that leads to this sort of like evil AI taking over. Um, but in reality, it's like we're doing it to ourselves, which is somehow more evil and scary because it's like we're purposely putting people out of work in order to save a little bit of extra money for the shareholders. So it's a very weird industry to be in, I'll be honest. Um, but you were saying that ties into other movies in Kubrick's
No, no,
catalog?
no, 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 no. I was saying it ties two of your points together. Because you had the first part where they first go to space with the other guy, the kind of Dr. Floyd, and everything is all capitalist, all the spaceship is capitalist. They stay in the
Yeah,
house
yeah,
in the
yeah.
space station. And then the next section you're talking about being more kind of pure science, but there's still that thread of corporate still following them in the HAL slash IBM.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
corporate eye is still looming over them, even when they're just trying to do undiluted science. That was all really, but yeah, wasn't the
I
best thread in the world. Um, one
no,
thing that
it's a cool theory though.
one thing as well that always caught my eye with this movie. So to give a bit of context, I guess the reason why I know quite a bit about this film's background is because in my we'd call what we'd call sixth year, your last year of secondary school. So you guys would call it 12th grade or senior year or whatever of high school. As for our history classes, we all have to write a basically an essay. It's part of our sort of final grade for the year, and it can be about anything you want. And I wrote mine on the historical um, context and the historical importance of 2001: A Space Odyssey. So there's a few things that I'm just trying to remember that I wrote obviously over 10 years ago now for a final year essay. But one thing that always kind of caught my eye even back then, and kind of even more so now that more stuff has come out like AI, which obviously wasn't really a thing 10 years ago, not in the same way it is now and the same way HAL was. But there's other things in there like, the video call that Dr. Floyd does with his daughter, you know,
Yeah.
eerily kind of similar to something like Skype or FaceTime now.
Mm-hmm.
On the spaceship, they're watching the news on what is essentially an iPad, it's tablets,
True.
but they're essentially using iPads basically. And funnily enough, this is just a very quick aside. When Samsung developed their first tablet, Apple were trying to sue them for intellectual sort of copyright infringement stuff, because the iPad had come out. And essentially Samsung won their case. And this is the reason why so many companies make tablets, is because 2001: A Space Odyssey showed that this wasn't a unique idea, unique to Apple. This concept of tablets
Huh.
with video devices has existed for decades.
Amazing.
Um, so 2001: A Space Odyssey is to thank for every every telecommunications company making tablets without any sort of issues with copyright infringement, because the idea was already formulated decades ago. So that's just an interesting aside.
I mean, let's be
Um,
honest, they're inferior products, but I'm glad there's competition. The iPad is pretty slick.
yeah, it is. I would agree. But yeah, there's just so much stuff in this film that's so ahead of its time. It's crazy. Like just like all the things that Kubrick thought to do, with the way that how gravity works in space, and how he was getting around that with just little things like the shoes that the air hostess wears that kind of make her stick to the floor,
Mm-hmm.
the pen kind of floating. It was really cool. And then we have to talk about the huge set he built for the kind of main space station that kind of goes around in a circle. You see that scene where um, I believe it's Frank Poole is jogging, and he's going around and around, kind of going what would in theory be upside down. But like Kubrick literally just built this space station on I can't remember the actual word now. There's a technical word for it but the set is basically spinning, kind of like what Christopher Nolan did with the hallway in Inception, where he just made the set spin and let them walk and run or whatever around the set moving, to give it that idea that they were kind of walking around in zero gravity, um, which was so cool. So there's so much stuff in this film that I love just because of how ahead of the time it was, how technically brilliant it is. Even just aside from like the story stuff, which I also think is very cool.
Yeah, yeah. You know, what, one thing that doesn't ever get enough credit when you talk about like Chris Nolan with the hallway, and it's gonna sound funny that I don't typically defend these kind of movies, but I was watching some of the behind the scenes features for some of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, and do you remember there's one of them where they get into this like vortex and it's like a ship like on a big basically vortex and it's like going down and they have to like save pull the ship out of it. I think it's like the fourth or fifth one.
Yeah, I think.
I do not remember
It's in the middle of
that.
yeah, no, it's okay. It's in the middle of an ocean and it's like angled and it's just like in this big just
Like
like
a whirlpool, that's three.
a
Yeah,
whirlpool, I'm
that's
sorry.
the end. That's the climax of three.
Three, okay. So they were showing how they did that and it's all practical effects. I mean, they add water in later, I think, in some capacity. But the everything in the boat is like on a rigged system, and so they get a full size boat with cast in this huge sound stage, and they set it up on this like particular kind of rig. It was so cool. I was like, damn, like I kind of wish, you know, the first one or two movies were great, and I think it dropped off pretty precipitously. But still, like these huge productions, it's sometimes it's cool to kind of see when they're using practical effects like this and really, I don't know, like using creativity. I always try to like I'm always a big fan of that, right? If I know it's more practical based.
But it's like Nolan. He's got a huge like how to put this. He has a quite a bit of love for 2001, and I'm sure Adam can speak pretty much to Inception better than I can. But like the amount of practical effects in that are like ridiculous.
Yeah, he's a big fan of practical. Like even like that set in Interstellar when Matthew McConaughey goes into that weird kind of where it has that 2001 moment where he's in that weird kind of vortex
Yeah, yeah.
thing. Like that's all practical. That looks like CGI, but it's an actual set they built to make it. And even though it looks insane, it's still a practical set. Or even something simple like in The Dark Knight where he flips the truck. Chris Nolan was like, "Man, let's just flip a truck."
Yeah,
Yeah,
or
right.
the one I was thinking with Inception was like the Joseph Gordon-Levitt being in the like rotating hallway.
Yeah,
It's just like let's
that's
just rotate the
directly.
hallway. Let's just
Yeah,
rig
and
it
that
up.
was directly inspired by how Kubrick made 2001. I found the technical term. It's called a centrifuge.
Okay.
Um, it basically it's literally on a huge axis and it just rotates the set around, and the actors just kind of move along with it. And they attach a camera to one fixed point, so it looks like it looks like the actors are moving around the room as it's moving, but really it's the actors are staying stationary and it's the room moving around them,
That's cool.
if that makes sense. So it just gives that it gives that really cool effect where it looks like they're kind of being shot all around and up and upside down and everything like that. When really they're staying static. It's the room and the camera itself that's moving.
Um, that's awesome. I guess while we're talking about camera work, I think there are some scenes we're gonna get to today where I was more impressed with the framing and staging and camera work from a on location set. Like there are some scenes in Barry Lyndon that are just some of the most beautiful pieces of staging and framing I think I've ever seen, or they rival like the best. So I'll get to that. So I think there's better camera work in some of his other movies, I think, although you know what he does in here in the camera is very creative, what we've been talking about, and cool, and interesting and progressive. I think there's better writing in other movies he makes than this. Um, uh, where this falls out of the top five for me and becomes a good movie, but on rewatch maybe not a great one for me, is uh, that I start to find the monkey suits a little bit sort of campy, and I don't think he means them to be that way. Um, Kind of pulls me out of that scene a little bit.
I have
And
a
then
love for like men in suits. I think I love the effect, so I'm a little biased there. But I mean, they're pretty
I
good
think the monkeys
suits.
look great. Yeah, I think
Yeah, yeah,
they look way good. It's better than fucking Planet of the Apes,
yeah.
which
Yeah, I
came
would
out I
say
think the
he
same year,
upgraded.
right?
Yeah, it was either the year. Yeah, it was the same year. So
well, sure. That's fine. Um, they're better than that. But yeah, anyways, I mean, they're okay. I just every time I watch it, I feel like they look more and more like look a little campy. Um, and then it goes
God damn
into
you, Stanley Kubrick, for not inventing CGI
I
monkeys
was
with
just
any
saying, what we
purpose.
need is the Russos to do a remake of 2001.
I was thinking the guy who did the Planet of the Apes remakes. What's that guy's name?
Oh, you talking about what the last two? That was Reese who did the Batman.
no
Oh
That's
yeah, you're
actually a
talking
first
talented director.
no
Matt
the first
Reeves.
yeah Matt
Yeah,
Reeves I think.
Matt Reeves did 2 and 3. Yeah,
Yeah, we need him.
yeah. If you want it to be good,
But yeah, I think it like the ideas are amazing in this and interesting in this, and the execution is, I mean, I'm fine saying the execution is flawless, as far as what he was trying to do versus like what he captured. Um, but rewatching Clockwork Orange and rewatching Barry Lyndon, I feel like to me those are more complete. And I know that everybody disagrees and all the critics disagree. But I just think Clockwork Orange is a absolute masterpiece. Watching it again, I'm shocked it's not higher up on lists than it is, even though it's high.
I
Um,
suppose we'll move on to it then, I guess.
and then yeah, and then Barry Lyndon too. But this one it probably just falls outside of the top five for me overall.
I think you're both utterly insane. This film is above criticism, as far as I'm concerned, but that's just me.
I feel like I'll keep this short. I think the thing that's hard with 2001 is when you're in that part where because it feels weird. Like I really give this movie high praise. I really like this movie, but where it has reached such a level that when you don't have it in like your favorite movies, you feel like you're almost criticizing it by just not having it there. And it's like it's a movie that's become that big where it's like it feels weird to talk about sometimes because you're like, yeah, I really like it. I think it's really cool. And then you're just like it's almost like you're missing that connective tissue that makes you like see something that you've missed even if you really like it. You're like, why don't I quite have that love for it? And I think that's where I kind of get lost with 2001.
Yep. So Vertigo and
No, you're just
2001
crazy for Vertigo. No,
are two movies that we all agree do not need to be in the top five.
no.
I'm
I
just
mean,
gonna go ahead and leave.
to be fair, like even Tokyo Story being in the top five, Tokyo Story is a great movie. But like four of all time, like come on, like
I'd agree with you on that one, but I do think that Vertigo and 2001 are top five movies. In terms
yeah,
of like actual filmmaking, I think they are. But look, let's not spend too much time arguing over semantics. Let's have a look at the film that Kubrick made in 1971, which was A Clockwork Orange, based on a book by Anthony Burgess. Let me see how the letterboxed synopsis reads for this. In a near future Britain, young Alexander Delarge and his pals get their kicks beating and raping anyone they please. Fun. When not destroying the lives of others, Alex swoons to the music of Beethoven. The state, eager to crack down on juvenile crime, gives incarcerated Alex the option to undergo an invasive procedure that will rob him of all personal agency. In a time when conscience is a commodity, can Alex change his tune? Okay, that's fair enough. I think that covers a good bit of it. Anyone want to jump in with their thoughts on A Clockwork Orange?
Movie's pretty dope. This will forever carry Malcolm McDowell's career until he dies.
yeah,
He will
true,
continue getting work for this.
yeah. Critics loved it more last year than this year. It fell from 77 to 104, so it fell out of the top 100. Um, to me, this is better than 2001, and I can get into why as we go along. But I'd love to hear what you think, Adam.
I hadn't seen a Clockwork Orange in about 10 years. I'd seen it a couple of times. I had it on DVD. Um, I'd watched it a few times. But I hadn't seen it in about, this is my first time in about 10 years, I'd say. Well, maybe not 10, maybe closer to 8 or 9, but it's been a while since I saw it. And I remembered a lot from it, but I wanted to rewatch it again because it's been so long. And like the whole way that kind of through the movie, I kept having moments going, this is horrible. I don't like this. This is not enjoyable. But then I'd be like, but it's really well made though. So it's like I really this is like a duality of man kind of inside of me going, I'm hating everything I'm seeing here, but it's really well made and the acting's really good and the
Right.
music's really good. It's like a
Yeah.
really good movie, but like everything I'm seeing is horrible. So I have this weird kind of battle within me where I know that this is a good movie. It is technically very good. Malcolm McDowell is fantastic. It's one of the best performances in any Kubrick movie. He's insanely good in this film. I love the kind of electronic Beethoven score that they
Yep.
have. I love the score of this movie. But yeah, there's just so much horrible shit that happens. It kind of sours it a little bit for me. And I know that it's not being done distastefully. I know there's a point. The point is to show how horrible the world is. I get why it's there. It's not like it's an exploitation film or whatever. It's not like, I spit on your grave or or whatever. I understand why it's there. Um, it just makes it hard for me to stomach the film. Um, the singing in the rain scene, I just skipped it this time. I just fast forwarded through the singing in the rain scene because I know what happens. I've seen it. So like I just skipped that scene
Right.
as soon as he started singing, do 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 do. I was like, all right, okay, time to skip. I'll come back in a couple of minutes, and I just skipped through it because I just didn't need to see that again. I've already seen it. But it's a really good movie. It is super good. But it's just hard for me to enjoy because I just don't like watching that kind of stuff in movies.
And it's kind of central to the plot here. It's not
Absolutely,
like,
I know, and this is the thing. I know that it's just not an exploitation movie. It's everything that happens in this movie happens for a reason. It serves the plot. Doesn't mean I enjoy myself watching it though.
no, no, that's what I'm saying. If you don't like that kind of stuff, it makes it hard because it is kind of central here. um, I get it. Zach, what do you think before I make a case here for it being the second best film from Kubrick?
I wouldn't go second bet. I do think Clockwork Orange is like really good. I'll echo it. Really, I could say a lot of what Adam says about it, but I think the difference is just a difference in like exposure. I kind of you talk about it's not an exploitation film. It kind of is like just like exploitation tastefully done. Um, I think it depends on how much of a negative connotation that is for somebody. I like exploitation films, so I don't see it as like a bad moniker necessarily. Um, I mean, there's so much of we talk about. I think we talked about it was last episode that Kubrick tends to make genre films, but make sometimes the best versions of them.
Yeah.
I would say this in a lot of ways does fit into exploitation, and it is one of the best versions of that, like the most artful and thoughtful versions of what that can be. And of course, it's a character study. It got it's we talk about Alex. You can talk about Alex as a character and kind of his development and his undevelopment and things as it goes through. It's just a cool movie. I enjoy it quite a bit in its own way, I guess, without sounding too weird about it. But yeah, I guess that I'll leave it there for now.
Okay, there is a stage in Fellini's career where he was his most confident, and possibly to a fault, making movies like Casanova, Satyricon, really pushing the envelope of like what censors would allow and what like his style to the extreme. And I think this movie represents Kubrick at his most like Kubrick, because he went from relatively calm title sequences and a relatively understated entry in Doctor Strangelove to super loud, interesting, crazy intro and music and visuals in 2001, and then even sort of took that a step more extreme here. Like right from the gate, you knew this was going to be a little bit more of an intense movie, right? It feels different, like even from the first few seconds, and it kind of doesn't let go. And I have a bias towards good directors making unhinged movies. Like I loved Satyricon and Casanova from Fellini, and not everybody shares that opinion. Like they're different, they're weird, but like I love it when good directors just completely go off. And I think to me this is Kubrick just like no strings attached. Like he's just completely unfettered. And what he does is he creates a world where people don't speak English the same way we understand it. They have their own language, they have their own culture, but it's like ours, but it's not exactly ours. So it feels close, but it also kind of has this weird feeling of like being something else. I think it makes but then you see that it's not the whole world; it's just the youth, right? So he's kind of, I think he's making a statement about like, or maybe the novel, whatever. But like, there's this whole
Yeah,
thing
I was
about
gonna say a lot of that is comes from like even the novel is even more hard to understand in terms of the different slang and stuff that's used.
Okay.
The film is pretty easy to understand compared to the novel. I haven't read it the whole way through, but I've read excerpts of it, and it's just half it's nonsense.
Well, I think my reading of it is that there's this whole thing about like the older folks never being able to understand the youth, right? And it's just kind of like playing on that, right? They have their own sort of way of speaking because as Alex gets um, corrected or re-educated, he speaks more normally, so to speak, right? Like he speaks more
No
like we
cap.
would.
Yeah,
No,
I'm God for real.
exactly. Slay. Um, so like I think I like how he brings in this like extreme element of youth and like the way youth are perceived, and I think this movie coming out when it did in history is also an interesting theme to pull from that like kind of old like World War I, World War II generation, not understanding what are now boomers, right? But like that generation of kids was pretty rebellious, right? So there was probably some of that sentiment going on around the time this came out. Um, and I just I love the commitment to this world that he had with like like the costumes and the different mannerisms from the different levels of people. Um, it just the whole movie had like it was like he took the vibe of Strangelove and stripped away a lot of the comedy, but kept that kind of zany vibe, especially as it progresses and gets more towards the way the police engage with him and like the way he is in jail and all this kind of stuff. It gets more abstract, and I just think it's like this is this and then Barry Lyndon for different reasons are like the Kubrick movies that were like made for me. I just for different reasons I'm just obsessed with. I could watch them both on repeat almost. Clockwork would be a little bit harder to watch on repeat for the reasons we've discussed, but I love them. I think this is so creative, so different from the kind of films that he's made up to this point. Um, and just yeah, I don't know. Uh, I think it's from kind of beginning to end, just like captivating. I think the music is used beautifully, and he just creates evil well in this, and you see how like evil doesn't leave the body, which is I love the way that that's portrayed as well. So that's
You,
my defense of Clockwork
yeah,
Orange.
and I'm not going to fight you on it. Simple as that, really. Like I don't, like I said, I like this is it's a good movie. I don't think it's as good as some of the other movies personally. Maybe that's just me. Obviously, I just don't enjoy it too much, but it's certainly well made.
I do have
Um,
one major criticism of this movie.
please go ahead.
As someone who just drinks milk out of a glass randomly and enjoys it, I get really tired of being called a psychopath for doing that. So
Heading down to the Korova Milk Bar with your droogs. One little fun little tidbit with this movie. There's not many fun things about this movie. We did some little tidbit. Do you guys know that Darth Vader is in this movie?
like, ooh, like the guy who like did like the physical.
Yeah,
Really,
yeah,
who is he?
yeah. David Prowse. Yeah, you can probably guess.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's the big bodybuilder guy who lives with the older gentleman as his kind of bodyguard. Um,
Oh, really?
yeah, so no, the older guy who's him and his wife get attacked early in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
film,
yeah, yeah.
and when they go back to that house later on after Alex has been released, he's the kind of bodybuilder, big guy who basically acts as his kind of like manservant, bodyguard kind of thing. That's David Prowse, who played Darth Vader on the set of Star Wars movies. A Yorkshire gentleman, I believe.
So I couldn't understand him either. That's fine.
Yeah, well, that's funny because that's like when they were, obviously he would have to read the lines for Darth Vader on set to be like, Luke, I am your father.
I want that cut. They need to if Lucas is going to keep recutting the film, give the people what they want.
Give us the David
Seriously.
Prowse. Give us the Tetley T Yorkshire cut.
Release the Prowse cut.
Yeah, release the Prowse cut. Yeah, that's my only real fun tidbit with this movie. Yeah, there's a lot of really good sequences though, like that whole sequence where they're doing that experimental test, where they have Malcolm McDowell's eyes actually kind of like clipped back. Like Jesus, I would not do that.
Oh, we meant to do this. We talked about this off thing. This isn't the first for the Kubrick stare, because it does happen in 2001 as well, right?
Yeah, a couple of them. You can argue Hal
Yeah.
has a Kubrick stare. Obviously, when not Frank, Dave Bowman is going through the Stargate, he has a stare. I'm trying to remember. Don't think there was any in the films we talked about last time out. So I think
So
Hal
this is
might
the
be the
first
first one.
and this is like the first traditional one, or is it
Yeah,
Dave?
that open. No, I think that opening shot of Alex is. I think that's the first like proper full on like that's like when you talk about a Kubrick stare, you either think of that or you think of Jack Nicholson, one or the other.
Yeah.
But I think Alex kind of staring as the kind of camera pulls back to show the milk bar. I think that's probably the first proper Kubrick stare.
Okay, because we meant to note it. I know we talked about. I was like, I can't now. I was afraid we missed it, but I think it is the first. I think you're right.
Yeah, I think using Hal as an example maybe is a little bit of a cheat, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think in terms of like the traditional sense, this is definitely the first one.
Which is kind of a fascinating motif to come up with, like this late in his career, because from this point he only has 4 more movies, and it's kind of become a staple for him.
Yeah, he made it very iconic, very in a short period of time. Any more thoughts on Clockwork Orange before we get into our last film?
Would y'all classify this as sci-fi?
This is actually something I've been thinking about for over 10 years. I don't know. It's really like because it's kind of what Zach said earlier about Kubrick kind of making some of the best films in each genre. And like I've been thinking about this literally for over 10 years. I would always think, yeah, 2001, Doctor Strangelove, The Shining, they're all like great examples of genre. And I was never able to pin down Clockwork Orange. But then when Zach says exploitation, that probably is the one that makes most sense. I know exploitation is not necessarily a genre, more of a sort of filmmaking, you know, Can't really think of
No,
the
it's
proper
okay to.
word.
I think it's okay to put it in as a genre. I mean, at least as a group of movies, right? That kind
Yeah,
of.
if we're calling it a genre, then yeah, I would say exploitation is what fits most. And I never heard of that 10 years ago when I first having, when I first had these kind of thoughts, I had never heard of exploitation movies. So when Zach said that's the one that fits best for me anyway. It kind of sits in that same kind of zone as like, this is gonna sound like I'm being an asshole. This kind of sits, like a Bruno Mattei in that kind of zone, where it's not necessarily sliding into a particular genre. It kind of ticks boxes of a few, but obviously has that clear kind of exploitation element. Obviously, Clockwork Orange is much better than anything Bruno Mattei could ever make.
Whoa, whoa,
But
whoa,
I didn't realize
whoa,
that's such a
whoa.
hot take. I'm sorry. But yeah, that's now that Zach said that, that's where I put it.
A lot
Science
of
fiction certainly it certainly has that kind of, maybe not science fiction, maybe kind of almost post-apocalypse or on the verge of the apocalypse.
yeah.
Because I don't think we ever see anything that's sort of strictly science fiction-y, really. It just seems like it's kind of like a dystopian future.
Yeah, because I'm sitting here thinking of like what we could classify, and like maybe in 71 the idea of like the brainwashing technique, but I feel like that has at least enough basis in reality, um, because there are, at least not done to that extent, but there are things that are done similar to that, or at least were attempted at some point. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to think if there's anything really else besides the world is just really, really strange.
Yeah, that's all I was gonna. I don't know. I think I could probably leave this episode calling it an exploitation movie. I think that's probably the right answer in my head now. But before we got into that, I was going to argue it's a sci-fi in the sense that it shares the same aesthetic as a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
Like for there to be a character like Alex, you would think it would be like a future state where it's like this, evil robots that are just set to, or like people that are raping and killing for a particular reason, not just because it's like fun for them, right?
Like this will resonate with you more, Chris. It's kind of like Alphaville. It kind of sits
Yeah, 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 yeah.
in a
Right.
world that's clearly not the present day world, but it's not explicitly like a science fiction-y kind of future either, where there's tons of like sci-fi devices and ray guns and shit like that.
And
Uh,
this, I was just thinking about this just now. This coming right after 2001, where we were kind of, at least me and you, Adam, were talking a little bit more about it's this idea that humanity can take its next step into not just being killers and being barbarians and stuff like that. This almost is almost a response of what it kind of looks like if we don't, or what the world can turn into. I don't know if it's
yeah.
like purposeful where it's right after 2001, but it also seems like I would assume that still like has some flow over.
No, and I agree. And I think it's definitely like in terms of like if we talk about the sort of themes of the film, or I could definitely see it as a kind of reaction to society. In terms of like looking at violence, like especially if you look at like late 60s, early 70s, a lot of violence on the streets, Manson murders, Vietnam War, a lot of violence kind of all around, permeating around the world. It definitely seems like, the book and then the film are kind of made as reactions to kind of say this is where society could devolve into if we don't get our shit together.
Yeah, I think that's what I was uh, poorly trying to say earlier. It's like the timing of when this comes out is important, I think, because there's a lot of fear of like the youth, right? Um, in the 60s and like in this kind of era of history.
Bunch
Um,
of hippies.
Bunch of
yeah.
bunch of hippies. Get your hair cut, you hippie. Right, will we move on to Barry Lyndon?
Yeah, yeah, I'm down.
Okay. So in 1975, Stanley Kubrick made Barry Lyndon. Um, Letterboxd reads as follows: an Irish rogue, uh, played by Ryan O'Neill with the worst Irish accent for a long time until Tom Cruise shows up. An Irish rogue uses his cunning and wit to work his way up the social classes of 18th century England, transforming himself from the humble Redmond Barry into the noble Barry Lyndon. Anyone
I'll
want to
start.
jump in?
This is Kubrick's best movie. I'll just leave it there. It's his best.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're in agreement there.
Okay, I'm the bad guy this time. I don't think it's his best movie. It's awesome though. It's a very very good movie. It's a I rate it. It's a 5-star movie for me. It's not my favorite, but it's a 5-star movie. There's a couple of others that I think that slightly edge it in terms of, well, there's exactly 2 others. I think the Doctor Strangelove and 2001, and then I'd probably have Barry Lyndon at number 3. For me anyway, that's my unofficial ranking until I rewatch some of the later ones. I've seen Barry Lyndon exactly twice. Once was over 10 years ago, again when I first kind of got into film, and I watched Barry Lyndon, and I thought this was the most boring ass piece of shit I had ever seen in my whole damn life. And I said, you know what? Fuck this. I'm watching Fight Club again for the 25th, 100th time. Fight Club, that's where real cinema lives. So that was my reaction when I first saw Barry Lyndon. And then I watched it again about 18 months ago. I got to see it in the theater. And
God,
I
I'm so
mentioned this at the
jealous.
end. Yeah, I mentioned this at the end of the last episode that where Barry Lyndon was shot was not too far from where I live, about 45 minutes, much closer to where my wife is from. A lot of it was shot around there. And when I went to go see this in the theater, they had a lot of people who had worked as extras. They had people who had worked on the production side in Ireland, like setting up the general production stuff, accommodation, transport, organizing extras, all that kind of stuff. They worked on the Irish side of the production, and they were doing like a Q&A and kind of talking about their experience. So it was very, very cool. And then they started the movie, and I was like, geez, I hope this isn't as boring as I remember it being. This film is so funny. Oh, this is such a funny film. And it's so good looking. It's incredible looking. The cinematography, as we just mentioned, is just insane. How good looking it is.
And they had to kind of go to like insane like dedication to get it to look like that, right? Like it's a lot of it's candlelit.
They had to invent new lenses.
Yeah, like that's
oh wow.
They literally invented new lenses so that they could shoot in such low light conditions because Kubrick wanted it to all be authentic lighting. He didn't want to use stage lighting. So they literally had to invent new lenses so that they could shoot in, just using candles. So insane technically. Despite Ryan O'Neill's terrible accent, I think he's very good.
He's great in the movie. Yeah, like I can't speak on the accent, but like his performance is great.
His accent is awful. But yeah, the performance is very, very good. Even if Ryan O'Neill himself was a piece of shit, his performance is very, very good. I think all the other cast are quite serviceable. There's nobody that really stands out for me.
It's his vehicle for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's in the title. Really, it is. It's all about him. Yeah, Barry Lyndon really became like in the space of 10 years. Barry Lyndon became my least favorite Kubrick movie to like in my top 3. It's so incredibly good. I can understand why 17-year-old me didn't like it, but
yeah, I don't think I would have liked it if I tried it then either.
Yeah, but when your tastes have grown and your palate has grown, yeah, you can only see good things about Barry Lyndon. I don't really think I have anything bad to say about it apart from Ryan O'Neill's accent.
So, Chris, tell us, where's it at?
17-year-old Adam was severely disappointed by the lack of Fallout Boy in Barry Lyndon.
We need a Fallout Boy recut.
29-year-old Adam is still actually that's one bad thing. This could do with more Fallout Boy in the soundtrack.
Well, most movies can.
I can only think of improvements there.
Yeah, we get some Pixies in there. We'll get it. We'll get this movie much more entertaining.
Much like Adam, critics did not like this movie as much on the first pass. It was only the 52nd best movie of all time, and upon consideration, it's moved up to 45.
Okay, so it's inching its way up.
Yeah, it's right below Le Mépris.
I don't even know what that is.
Contempt.
We watched that film.
Oh, okay. Say the American name.
Jeez Louise. It's funny, just to kind of pick up on the point I said. So obviously I'm recording in my office on a Friday, which is weird for us because we normally record on Sundays. So Neve is working in her office, so she can hear everything I'm saying right now. She just sent me a text saying, "Don't forget to mention that my uncles were in it." So Neve, my wife's uncles were extras in Barry Lyndon. I forgot about that
That
important
is
aspect
awesome.
of it.
Were
That
they
is
like what at the battle scene, or was it a different?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
that is awesome. Um, well, in honor of Neve's uncles, um, I'd say I think this is my favorite one as well. I think it wins like top spot for me on two main things. One, the first 100 minutes of this movie is the best character ascent that will ever be filmed. I don't think it's possible to do it better. It's funny, it's engaging. It actually, y'all might think I'm crazy, but it reminds me a lot of like the pacing and the styling of Princess Bride. I know they're two very different movies. Even aesthetically, Princess Bride doesn't even look,
I
near as
just want to
good.
know. I feel like every time Chris is about to make a comparison, I feel like there's like a wheel he has where he's just gonna like flick it real quick and say, "What movie am I comparing it to?" There we go.
I'm gonna be a bad guy now and say that I've never seen The Princess Bride.
For some reason, I knew that. I feel
What?
like I knew that for some
I've
reason. I
never
feel like you've
seen it.
What?
mentioned it before.
Never seen it.
Okay, fine. Whenever you're back from being selfish and having a child, um, I'm gonna do like movies that were important to me growing up week, and it's gonna be like Never Ending Story and
God, I gotta watch the horse
Princess
get
Bride,
killed again.
or
No, I'm
or
skipping. I'm skipping that part.
or
Again.
Willow, or whatever one you haven't seen. We'll figure out the ones that some of y'all haven't seen. Princess Bride is a must watch. Oh my God! But anyways, Princess Bride is less quality than Barry Lyndon as far as filmmaking goes. It's not, I'm not comparing the two, but they both had a similar kind of like almost like a near fantasy style for me. And like Princess Bride is a period piece, right? Um, uh,
Technically.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a comedy, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a fantasy comedy. I'm not trying to compare these two, other than to say I think they both live in like an interesting space of kind of this like Princess Bride is more heavily on the fantasy, but I think Barry Lyndon is still it's almost like a fantasy. He's the strongest one at boxing, he's the best one at fencing, he's like the smartest one, he's the wittiest one, he can speak German, like it's
Barry
just
Lyndon is a Gary Stew. Is this where we're going?
is a what?
It's a male Mary Sue.
Mary Sue.
Oh, you don't know that term? It's like in fiction when there's a female character who's just good at everything and they have no flaws.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, yeah, he's a Mary Sue. And then it like there's that quote right when things are about to teeter. And I wish I had written the quote down, but essentially it's like the same qualities that bring a man to success are often the ones that lead to his demise, right? And it's just such a beautiful, like powerful quote to bring in from that narrator right at the moment where it like shifts and he just makes a series of bad decisions and also has bad luck. Um,
Which
I
I want to
just
add on to that. Are we going to talk about the ending of this one or no?
no, we could talk about
Well,
the ending, right? There's no spoilers to Barry
it's not like
Lyndon,
it's a
right?
big twist or anything that we're
No, but I
laying on
just
people like Barry was his own brother or something, you know.
Barry was the father and the mother. Um, I don't know. This is another one that's nihilistic, I think, in the sense of like nothing matters. Um, and I don't know. It's the perfect script to me. The cinematography can't be beat. There's that one scene, Zach, I want to get to what you're saying. There's that one scene that stands out to me where it is literally a painting. It's like Barry Lyndon is slouched in his chair. There's a table right behind him
oh, it
with
looks just like a painting. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it is
gorgeous.
a painting, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
And especially watching it on like a 4K, kind of like a nice quality scan. Just like, holy hell, this is beautiful. Anyways, what were you gonna say, Zach?
No,
What were
I
you
just got to add on to that because I agree with everything you're saying. He's very much a rise and a fall type of movie. It's really uncovering how unlikable he is because he's a really unlikable person. One thing I love about the end. Now, I have talked to people who disagree with my interpretation of the end, so I'd be curious to hear how you guys look at it. At the end, when he's having the duel with his stepson, it's his stepson, right? Yeah. There's a part where he decides to shoot the ground rather than take the easy shot. And I've read that people really think that's just to humiliate him. I have never felt that. I felt like that was the one time where he's like, I am not going to take advantage of the situation, because he actually felt bad for him and really wanted to do the right thing, and it ends up screwing him over.
Oh, I 100% agree. He wanted to get out of that duel. Not to like save his own life, but I think he honestly thought he was going to kill that kid, and he didn't want to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I thought as well. He had that moment of self-awareness, thinking, I've been such an asshole.
Yeah.
Because like the kid throws up because he knows what's coming, and like
Yeah.
you feel so bad for him. And but yeah, I got downvoted to hell. I can't remember what subreddit it was, because I put that interpretation there, and I'm like, am I wrong? Like, that is exactly how I read the end of that. But people are like, no, he's there to humiliate him. I was like, I just don't think he's an asshole. But I don't think he's that much of an asshole to say, haha, I'm gonna like shoot the ground instead of like shooting you. Like, it never made sense to me.
It doesn't make any sense, because if he shooting the ground gives, well, so what their thoughts is that Barry Lyndon was so up his own ass that he thought if he shot the ground, he would think the kid would miss, and then he would get another chance.
Well, the idea is like, once the person like misses and the other person shoots the ground, apparently in the rules of dueling, it's usually over at that point.
Okay.
They just leave it there, and the kid takes the opportunity to shoot anyway. But it's like, he knows that kid hates him.
Yeah.
Like, he knows it. Like, it's no question. Like, I just feel like it's almost like he was asking for some form of redemption when it was too late. That's how I felt it.
Yeah, I would agree. He's basically, trying to, by shooting the ground, it's him essentially putting out an olive branch.
Yeah.
Like, we can just end
this has gone too far. This is, let's just call this as it is. This has gone too far. That kind of a thing.
And the kid takes advantage just like he did.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways at the beginning.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. I think he's in a weird way. Even though this kid is a sniveling, whiny, bratty, spoiled kid, he's actually right most of the time. Like,
like the kid is
Barry
just
Lyndon,
a kid. He's just a kid.
He's just a kid, right? And like Barry Lyndon was shitty to his mom like the whole life.
And of course, at that point, you feel bad for Barry because he just lost his son, and you can tell it tears him up. But Barry was awful up until that point.
Yeah, like he was a shitty person. It's so mind blowing. It's such a shift as you go through the movie, because you're like, here's this kind of hero. He's like the best, right? He's like the best at everything. He can like maneuver like all the army generals, and he like wins favor with everybody, and he's a good gambler, and blah 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 blah. And then you just realize that he's just like a selfish, like he's just never had to like do any self work.
And he's got, his ego only gets bigger the more successful he is.
That's a good way to say it. And eventually the ego leads to the fall, right? It's kind of
and I mean, we look at like the battle scene where we're just seeing the lines of people get like tore down while he's in the military. Any of those bullets or cannons could have hit him.
Right.
It's luck that he's there.
Right.
A lot of what he did in life, to me, was him being really lucky. I guess luck of the Irish, right, Adam?
Don't bring that stereotypical shit into my fucking podcast.
Every chance he took early on paid off, right? Like, he took a huge risk admitting to that guy that he was a spy, but it paid off. It endeared him to that Viscount or whatever, or Vicomte or Chevalier or whatever it was called, right? Like, it endeared him to that guy, and they wound up creating like wealth together. The other thing that I thought was interesting about his like wealth creation is that his mom called it out appropriately. He never actually had any money. It was always like he was always living off of somebody.
he freeloaded the hell out. I mean, it's pretty much the whole
Yeah,
purpose of his first wife is he freeloaded the hell out of her.
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. He just took advantage of everybody he could possibly do.
Yeah.
Anyone he could possibly take advantage of, he did it.
So do you think it was a trauma response, or do you think I'm overthinking it? Or is he just a sociopath? Like, what are we supposed to leave thinking about Barry Lyndon? Because he
I think
leaves with,
he's for me, he's just a pure opportunist. I don't know if we call him a sociopath, but like,
No, I think he feels emotions. He just gets lost in it.
yeah, and he's maybe it's because of like his upbringing or whatever, but like to me, it seems as though he's just somebody who will take, if you give him an inch, he'll take a mile, that kind of thing. If you give him any kind of an in, he will take advantage of you for, but like I don't think he's doing it to be necessarily like a bad person. I don't think he's doing it to be bad, as what's the best way of putting this? He's not doing it to hurt the person he's taking advantage of. He's just doing it because he's selfish and he just wants everything himself. And he doesn't really care. He's
hmm,
not being malicious, I don't think. He's not saying I'm going to ruin this person's life because I don't like them. He's doing it because he's like, well, I'm going to ruin this person's life because it will make my life better, and all I care about is myself. So I just think he's just a deeply selfish person who will do anything to
or,
to
or
help
just,
himself.
just to build on what you're saying, or is he not even thinking he's ruining someone's life? Is he just thinking like, because he spends his wife's entire fortune, right? Or like a huge chunk of her fortune.
I
Uh,
think, I think part of that could just feel entitlement. I'm her husband at that time. He has a right to him to spend her money because he is the male figure there. So I think a lot of it's just thoughtless entitlement. Like he
mm,
just doesn't consider it beyond that. Like he's just
mhm.
doesn't consider beyond his own self.
Yeah, he's just deeply selfish, as selfish a person he could possibly be.
Not necessarily an evil person. I don't think he's evil most of the time. I think he does some pretty heinous stuff sometimes, but I don't think he's inherently evil. I think he's let greed and everything else
Yeah,
kind of take over who he is.
greedy and selfish. He's just like a little brat,
Yeah,
basically.
he's a kid. He's somebody who didn't grow up. I mean, we learn at the beginning he didn't. Of course, he didn't have a father figure much in his life, and
Mhm,
he had to deal with that. And he grew up, it seems, not well off, and he took
mhm.
the opportunity to say, "I'm." Most people would praise someone. What's the term? Picking yourself up by your bootstraps. But I mean, the way he does it is probably not the way people have in mind. But it is him being self-made in his own mind.
Well, and I think we watch formative moments for him too, right? Because his love, he dedicated himself fully to his cousin, and she betrayed him, right? And then he escaped, thinking he killed her pursuer,
Yeah,
and was immediately robbed of everything he had. So I think in a way we also kind of watch the formation of this guy that's like, I'm done being a victim, right? Like no one's ever going to do this to me again in a way, right?
Hmm.
So he dominates the romantic relationship he's in, and he's always like the strongest one and a fighter, um, until some whiny snivelly like kid catches him.
and I mean, in fair, like I said, we talked about in fairness that kid because he is just a kid. But that part where like he humiliates him in front of all those people, like where he's like, what is he like whipping him basically, whipping boy in him,
Hmm.
and it's like I think that's the moment. I don't know if you're supposed to really turn on Barry before that, but it's really the moment, at least I did. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, this kid kind of deserves to do anything at this point because that's rough.
Yeah.
What?
Just speaking
Yeah.
of Bullingdon, just an interesting fact: the guy who played um, the sort of the kind of older version of Bullingdon is a guy called Leon Vitali.
Mhm.
He didn't do much acting after Barry Lyndon. Did a little bit here and there. So he actually mainly worked as Kubrick's assistant and sometimes casting director. So he's credited as assistant to Stanley Kubrick in both The Shining, Full Metal Jacket, and Eyes Wide Shut. And he was the casting director for Full Metal Jacket and Eyes Wide Shut.
I thought you were gonna tell me he was the casting director for Barry Lyndon. It's like I looked around everywhere to see who could play this part, and it turns out it was me.
Can you imagine casting yourself in that role?
not quite, but I just thought it was interesting that he just ended up,
cool.
rather than being an actor, just basically hung around with Kubrick until Kubrick died, basically.
He's like, yeah, man, I'll stick around. Because
Yeah.
I mean, we're gonna get into. I guess we'll get into this in a few minutes. But I mean, the space between Kubrick's like next 3 films is like really wide.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's impressive that he stuck around, because a lot of people be like, yeah, I kind of found another job, dude. It took you like 10 years to make another movie.
I suppose we'll cover that now then, as we're wrapping up. So unless there's any kind of just final little tidbit about Barry Lyndon you want to throw out there.
No, yeah, go ahead.
I was say, if somebody here listening has avoided it, please watch it. I know it sounds like the most boring thing on the planet, but it's really good. I didn't watch it because it sounded boring.
I found it boring and then I loved it. So there you go. That's the perfect example. Right. So next time out, we're going to be ending our Kubrick run with his three final films, which will be The Shining, Full Metal Jacket, and Eyes Wide Shut. I have not seen Full Metal Jacket or Eyes Wide Shut in about 10 years. I've only seen either of them once, so I'll be interested to revisit. I've seen Shining a bunch of times. I don't even know if I'll rewatch it. I know The Shining inside and out. One thing I'll say to you guys, if you get a chance, watch Room 237.
Okay, I'm gonna try to watch it before we record
most
again.
deranged, hilarious shit I've ever seen in my life.
I've actually seen it, but it's been since it released, so I don't remember it all that well.
It is just a room of paranoid schizophrenics that have just been let loose. It is hilarious how unhinged these people are from reality. So I would very recommend, if you do get a chance to watch Room 237, I would love to hear your thoughts on that, because I think it is the funniest shit I've ever seen.
Amazing. Okay, I'll do my best.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks, y'all. I think to me this is the pinnacle of, if you're gonna break his films up into like chunks of 3 or 4 in the case of the first one, this is the best group. There's no way.
I agree.
Yeah, I would have to agree as well.
Yeah.
We have 2 of his top 3 films here, in my opinion, so could only agree.
Yeah, same.
Awesome. Thank you, folks. Fun as always.
Same. I'll see y'all next time.